Going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Pistons Territory podcast on the Motor City Metrics YouTube channel. It is John finally back at it. Had a little bit of a getaway weekend. I went to a country festival. It was pretty fun, but I'm back into the swing of things now. Not too much going on with the Pistons, but there is some stuff to talk about. We're going to get creative and, got some trade ideas, got some topics to go over, but obviously Parker, who's been on the channel before, been on the podcast. Parker, what's new with you? And just say what's up to everybody.
Not much. Been working on I'd say our baseball podcast, Beer Bat Podcast. Starting another podcast, so that'll be
Wait,
fun.
you're starting
Yeah,
another podcast?
yeah, not sports though. It's completely it's like a comedy variety show. Announcements coming soon. And I have my handful with that. Going to Lions training camp on the 31st, so that'll be fun. Got some tickets today. I'll be bringing Maz, and yeah, that'll be fun. I got 4, so I got 2 more left. It's at 8:30, so let me know. Um, yeah, nothing really else going on. I had jury duty yesterday. Missed a whole day of work.
Wow.
Sat there for 5 hours and didn't have a case to go over, but got paid. I got paid, so we're chilling. Yeah, just the usual week. Jury duty is always a fun thing, but yeah.
Wow. I did not know you're having a new podcast. You're going to have to
Yeah,
fill
I've
me
been
in on
keeping it
that.
hush hush. This has kind of been the biggest sneak peek of it.
Oh, I'm excited to see it. But just a couple topics to go over. There was a video of Cade Cunningham on the internet today. Now, listen, I'm not gonna get excited about this. It's just him playing pickup basketball. But that kind of got me thinking about just Cade Cunningham in general and what he means to the Detroit Pistons, what he means to this franchise. If you just kind of want to talk about the importance of Cade Cunningham to the Detroit Pistons, like how much of the Pistons' future is in the hands of Cade Cunningham, and just the pressure on him, being that he was the number 1 overall pick. He had comparisons to guys like Luka Doncic, just could be a superstar player, the best player on a championship team. Talk about the importance of him to this Detroit Pistons team and where, how he could lead this team going into the future.
I mean, when he was getting drafted, he was touted as the guy of his draft. So, I think there's a lot to say about that. I also think that last year said a lot without Cade Cunningham. I think the team was a lot worse without him. Um, Cade is a Cade isn't Cade is an all around. If we're gonna talk like an analogy, when you played like Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, you got your all around characters. He's one of those. He's like your Mario on the team. Um, so Cade's extremely important to that franchise. He's the captain. If we're gonna name a guy a captain, it's gonna be Cade. And when he went out, team only won 17 games and uh got the 5th pick, picked up nice guy named Oscar Thompson. We'll talk about him later in the show, but the importance of Cade Cunningham is, I think he is up there on the list of if let's say there's a top 10 list of most important players on a team ranked. So obviously we would say LeBron number 1. LeBron's the most important player on any team that he's on. You can put Luka Doncic on there. You can put, I'm trying to think,
Kevin
Kawhi Leonard.
Durant. Yeah, Kevin Durant.
Yeah, Kevin Durant. I think Cade is going to prove that when he is healthy, he is the most important player on that team. And then when you got guys that we are now developing in Oscar Thompson, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, James Wiseman, he's going to be a really good person to not build this roster, but assist in the development of the roster.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking about when I saw those videos of Cade, just thinking about how important he really is, because the NBA is a star-driven league. We've seen
Yep.
that. You have to have, other than the 04 Pistons, if you don't have a top 10 player in the NBA, you're not winning a championship. Maybe the Pistons could be that exception again, but I wouldn't really count on that. But I just think for Cade Cunningham, like I look at Troy Weaver, I think his job is on the line. If Cade Cunningham doesn't pan out, then I think Troy Weaver is probably going to see his way out. Like, I think Cade is the guy that's going to make this work. As good as Asar Thompson and Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren can be, those guys aren't leading you to a championship. Cade Cunningham has to be a top 10 player in the NBA. He has to be the best player on a championship team in order for this team to get to where it wants to go. And yeah, just like he is so important to this team. And I don't want people to get caught up in the smaller moves that the Pistons make. We've seen they didn't go out and make big moves this offseason because they know if they're going anywhere, it's going to be on the back of Cade Cunningham and obviously those secondary guys like Ivy and Thompson and Jalen Duren. But just looking at Cade Cunningham's numbers, 76 games played through his first 2 years, 41% from the field, 31% from three, 18 points a game, about 6 rebounds and 6 assists. So I'm not going to say he's been a disappointment so far, but transitioning into my next topic, and I think we're going to try, or at least I am going to leave Cade Cunningham out of this discussion. It's the Detroit Pistons player with the most pressure heading into next season. Obviously, there's veterans on this team that are probably going to get traded. I don't think there's a lot of pressure on them, but there's also some young players that are really going to try to establish themselves as long-term pieces to this team. So if we're going to leave Cade Cunningham out of this discussion, because we know the pressure that comes with being the number 1 overall pick and the hype that was built
And the
around him.
number 1 guy in your team.
Yeah, and the number. So is there anybody else you think that has a lot of pressure on them for the Detroit Pistons heading into next season?
Killian Hayes. I think that's always a name you got to bring up when it comes to pressure. He potentially lost his job with the signing of Marcus Sasser. Marcus Sasser dropped 40 points in the freaking summer league.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
This guy is great. Like I said, I think Marcus Sasser is a potential 6th man of the year. I think that's his ceiling. I think Killian Hayes, Marvin Bagley is probably going to get traded regardless. There's just not enough space for him. But I'd say maybe on the starting lineup or one of the more higher up on the lineup list, Isaiah Stewart just got a payday. I think he has a little bit of question marks around him relating to his game. I mean, I don't believe he's one of the better defenders on the team. He is developing a 3-point shot, but I mean, we don't really have anything to base it off of. I think there's a lot of question marks around. It's really the guys that you have a lot of question marks around. James Wiseman. James Wiseman, I think, has a lot of pressure. I mean, you got a really young player in Jalen Duren who plays pretty similarly to James Wiseman. I mean, Jalen Duren's more of a get in the paint and bully him, where James is starting to, I think he's trying to develop into a 3-and-D guy. But who knows? I think those 3 names, Killian Hayes, Isaiah Stewart, and James Wiseman, are the 3 players. I'd say 3 young players because like we said, veterans never really have the pressure on them. But yeah, those are definitely the guys I'd say that have the most pressure.
Yeah. So out of those 3 guys you named, you mentioned Jalen Duren. To me,
James Wiseman.
Yes, you did mention James Wiseman, but I'm looking at Jalen Duren as a guy who you essentially traded Jeremy Grant for. And Jeremy Grant, he wasn't an all-star for the Pistons, but he was the next best thing to it. He was playing at a very, very high level. So essentially, you flipped Jeremy Grant and you got Jalen Duren out of that. And to me, when you look at the last Detroit Pistons championship team, you had a guy in Ben Wallace who was so important to that team in the middle. I think Jalen Duren needs to be that for the Pistons. He has to be the Pistons defensive anchor. And I was listening to the heavyweights, and they were talking about this, the pressure on him to be that force in the middle, to be that rebounder, to be that rim defender, to be that lob threat. I think Jalen Duren has a tremendous amount of pressure on them because right now, James Wiseman could prove to be the center of the future. But to me, I think it's Jalen Duren right now. And I think he's going to have to be that guy, that defensive anchor for them. And I think there's a lot of pressure that comes with that. I know he's young. We've seen him trying to develop a jump shot in summer league. But I just think if this Pistons team, they have to get better defensively. They were atrocious defensively, and I think he's going to be at the forefront of that. And I think if this team is going to have a championship ceiling, Jalen Duren has to be a big part of that. And I'm not saying he has to be a guy who can consistently shoot a jump shot. Like I look at a guy like Bam Adebayo. To me, he is the perfect center in today's NBA for what he can do. He can dribble the ball up the floor, can shoot the mid-range shot. If Jalen Duren can ever become that, that's great. But I don't necessarily think he's going to be able to be that. A guy you could put the ball in his hands and he can create offense. But to me, he has to be this team's defensive anchor and kind of follow in the footsteps of guys like Bill Laimbeer and Ben Wallace and even Bob Lanier. I don't think he's ever going to reach that level, but I think if he could ever reach maybe an all-star level, but I think he's going to be very, very important for the Pistons' future.
Yeah, and I can definitely see pressure being on Jalen Duren, but you got to remember he's one of the youngest guys in the league. I think I definitely think there is somewhat pressure on him, but I actually think contrary to what you said, I think he can lead a team offensively. I do think. I mean, he's a really young untapped player. I think that's one of the benefits of being on the Pistons is that such a young team that you can go that players we trade for young players like James Wiseman and RJ Hampton to see if they can develop. And I mean, some work out, some don't, but I think Jalen Duren does definitely have the potential to become an offensive powerhouse. I mean he's good. I mean there's no questioning that. It's just his development and the way he develops through the process of well, especially being under Monty Williams. I think three players that are gonna boost in their development are going to be Jalen Duren, Killian Hayes, and Cade Cunningham. And I think they're all three are going to have just such a stellar year.
Yeah, and I mean Jaden Ivey, I didn't really mention him. I think he's going to be fine no matter
Yeah, I
whether
think
he's
he's
with
off the
yeah,
list.
whether he's with the Pistons long term or not. As long as injuries don't really hurt him, I think he's going to be an elite player wherever he plays. And I mean, I've mentioned potentially trading Jaden Ivey down the line and running with a backcourt of Caden Asar Thompson. I don't know how realistic that is, but I mean, I think there's a lot of guys with a lot of pressure. I think the young guys, especially, I like James Wiseman. This is a guy who's going into his fourth season, hasn't really been able to carve out a substantial role on a team. He's going to get that opportunity this year. Marvin Bagley, I kind of agree with you on him. I think he's out the door. I don't necessarily see him having a big role with this team. And then
Yeah,
Killian Hayes, who I'm still going to be a believer in. I don't think he's going to, be an impact player for the Pistons, but I still think one day he could be a contributor on an NBA team. But I just think overall for the long-term future of the Pistons in terms of a championship ceiling, I'm not so much worried about Jaden Ivey. I'm not so much worried about Cade Cunningham. I'm not even that worried about Asar Thompson. I think we'll get to him in a little bit. I think he looked really good in summer league. I think Jalen Duren, to me, defensively, and that's a big thing for centers is being able to stay on the court. We saw with Andre Drummond getting into foul trouble. We need him to be on the court for us and be available for us to really help this team. But if we want to get into summer league, I didn't watch too much summer league, but I was keeping track of what happened. We
yeah,
obviously had the Marcus Sasser 40-point game, which was good to see because I know he was struggling a bit in summer league and kind of broke out in that game. Obviously, Asar Thompson had some pretty good stat lines as well, really showed his defensive potential. We saw Jaden Ivey a bit, Jalen Duren. It was a pretty fun summer league. I think it says a lot about the Pistons that almost half their roster was playing on the summer league team, which I just goes to show you how young this team is. But was there any final takeaways you had from summer league? Anything that surprised you? And just what was your takeaway from the Detroit Pistons summer league?
I think Oscar Thompson was robbed of a summer league first team. I think that's first and foremost. I think he was stellar. I mean, you really saw it throughout the what do you call that? A season, series? I don't know.
Yeah, I
I don't
don't
know what
like
the exact
a
terminology is.
handful, yeah, like a handful of games.
Games. throughout the games that he played, I mean, you really saw. I mean, people. I think a good comparison for, and this is not actually my comparison. I actually saw this on Twitter, and I kind of did some research, and I kind of agree. Um, Oscar Thompson is kind of playing like an Andre Iguodala in Philly. I think him and his play style are very similar to Iguodala. Um, if we can have a guy on the Pistons that plays like Iguodala and isn't as old, dude, that's going to be such a benefit. I mean, we have a. I mean, we're not a. And when you think about the Pistons are all about grit. I mean, all of Detroit sports. It's all about the bat. It's all about that grittiness that these teams bring. And I think Oscar Thompson is showing that physicality that you need on this Pistons roster, where you got Cade Cunningham getting hurt. I think Oscar Thompson, if Cade does go down, can be a guy that steps up and is the number one point scorer on their team. Oscar Thompson, I mean, what in the game against the Raptors, you just saw it where he blocked the ball from Grady Dick, steals it, makes it to the other side, and does like a 360 layup. Like athletic, like that kid is athletic, and I think it goes to show you that. I mean, maybe there is a little bit of pressure on Troy Weaver, but I mean, he hasn't really missed on any of his selections besides Killian Hayes and
Sadiq Bey, man,
Sadiq Bey wasn't a
maybe,
I mean, he was first team all rookie when he was
yeah.
drafted. So I mean, that's not a terrible miss, but I mean, that 2020 draft was shallow. I mean, you had 3 picks at the top 3 in Anthony Edwards, LaMelo Ball, and James Wiseman. 2 of those guys became all-stars. Tyrese Halliburton was also in there. I mean,
Yeah.
you didn't you sh- I don't really know if we can expect a lot from a 2020 draft that didn't really have a lot of talent.
Well, I will say he did pass on Tyrese Maxey 3 times in that draft.
He passed on 2 guys.
Yeah.
Both Tyrese's.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. But I just when you're talking about Sar Thompson, I did pull up his stats. So he played 4 games in summer league, 29 minutes a game, 13 and a half points, 47% from the field, 27% from 3. Took 3 attempts per game. So he was definitely taking the threes, which we're not
Not making
expecting.
them, but
Yeah, we're not expecting him to be a great 3-point shooter right now. 65% from the free throw line. That's obviously something that's going to be a concern. He wasn't a great free throw shooter in the overtime elite league, but that's definitely a big area of progression he needs to make. But these are the intriguing numbers. Averaged 10 rebounds a game, 3.5 assists, while averaging 2.3 steals per game and 1.8 blocks per game. Those are
insane.
that's a crazy stat. Now I know it's summer league. That is a crazy stat. I have never seen like that. He's not going to average that obviously during his rookie year, but that is wild to see. And I think it shows how impactful he can be just in all spectrums of the game, blocking shots, defending the rim, being a menace on the perimeter, rebounding the basketball. I mean, 10 rebounds a game. That's really, really good to see. And I think the 3-point shooting and the free throw shooting, that's the question mark with him. I've seen the Andre Iguodala comparisons. I don't know if I'd go that far, but I think overall, I think
I
we
think he
should
has a
be
ceiling of Andre Iguodala.
yeah. But what was Andre Iguodala ever a great 3-point shooter?
No.
Or no? Yeah, I think that's a good
I mean,
comparison.
let's look at the stats. I'll look it up right now.
Okay, but yeah, I mean, just for Sar Thompson, I think we should be ecstatic with what we saw in the summer. Like, I think he exceeded all expectations. So yeah, and then in terms of Marcus Sasser, played 5 games, 16 points a game, 44% from the field, 27% from 3 on 7 attempts a game. So Marcus Sasser was getting some shots up, and did average 3.4 assists per game. So Marcus Sasser, he was just a guy that was looking to score the ball, and I think
Yeah,
that's what he's going to be meant to be, is a guy who can be a menace defensively, play on the perimeter, and score off the bench for the Pistons. But
he's going
did
to
you
be our
pull up?
spark guy.
Yeah. Did you have Iguodala's stats?
Yeah, 33% from 3 in his career.
Yeah, I mean, if Thompson ever gets to that,
I mean,
I
what
mean,
was he at, 23, you said?
27%,
I mean, that's
which
not very far off.
yes, and then very, very limited sample size as well. Obviously, shooting, you're gonna go through hot streaks, you're gonna go through cold streaks. Um, but yeah, I think we should be ecstatic with what we've seen from him, and that to be would be my biggest takeaway from summer league as well. Would be Asar Thompson.
Be excited is the 2 words I'd say.
Yeah, and like I was hesitant on them drafting Asar Thompson. I like either of the Thompson brothers because I just didn't think they really fit with the Pistons. I know you were a big Jarris Walker fan. I was a big.
Yeah.
I like Taylor Hendricks and Cam Whitmore, which I still can't believe Cam Whitmore fell to 20. That's just wild to me. But
Dude,
I
he was
think
good.
I know, and it's worrying. It's worrying me, man. It is scaring me because he's
I
so
mean, you also
young
gotta think
still.
of all the other teams that also passed on him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can't be super guilty of it because a lot of other teams saw the same thing that we were seeing.
Yeah, but he's so young too. Like that's what worries me is
Yeah.
he's just like he could have realistically just went back to college and maybe been a lottery pick or a top 10 pick or maybe a top 5 pick next year. But I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah.
We'll just
And
have
I
to
think,
wait and see.
I don't know. I think summer league doesn't really put a great representation of what these guys will become. There's a lot of superstars in the league that never did really a lot in summer league, and there's a lot of guys that did a lot in summer league that never really were anything in the NBA. So I don't know. I can't really when we talk about summer league, it's really hard to gauge because you're playing. I mean, Oscar Thompson's playing people that he already played probably in well similar level guys that he played at overtime. I mean, Scoot Henderson was probably doing playing the exact same people he was playing on Ignite. Um, who else is another G League guy that was there?
Oof, there's been so many this year, but
Yeah,
I'm drawing a blank.
a lot of the draft this year was just straight G League or outside uh leagues. So I mean, these guys that have already played this level of basketball before are just playing the same people. So it's really hard to gauge. I think Brandon Miller didn't do well at all in summer league. I mean, I think he was close to fouling out in every single game that he played. But I mean, Wembanyama looked great. I mean, there's no really saying anything about that. I mean, he was pulled after the second game. So
I think to me, I'm feeling like a little bust alert with Brandon Miller. I don't know what it is about him. I'm just a
I'd wait.
little
I'd
worried.
wait to see him next to LaMelo and see how LaMelo and see how they play together. I don't. He's not going to be your number one scorer. I think that's a guarantee with Brandon Miller. I think he's going to be a 3-and-D guy. I mean, he's not going to average 30 points a game. I think he's going to probably average like 12 or 15 with like 10 rebounds. I mean, I think that's realistic.
Yeah. But I did kind of want to, since we kind of were getting into a little NBA, I do like talking NBA on the pod, and there's not a whole lot going on. I think the offseason is mostly over. We're still waiting on the Damian Lillard trade, which I do think Damian Lillard will be on the Miami Heat next
I
season.
don't know. I
What do
don't
you
know.
what do you think is happening? Because the last thing I heard was like it was Tyler Hero and basically a bunch of picks and pick swaps.
The
And I think,
Blazers aren't complying with it, though. The
yeah,
Blazers are like, "No."
I mean,
I'm here
it's probably the best they can get because I don't think there's. I'm not saying there's not a market for him, but he's an aging point guard. He's obviously on a huge contract. Like, if he wants to go to Miami, I think he's probably going to force their hand, and he's going to go to Miami.
I think I've heard well, doing some research on that, I've seen there's 3 other teams that I've seen besides, Miami. I've seen the Utah Jazz in that conversation. I've seen the Brooklyn Nets. I think Dame with Mikal Bridges would be stellar. And I can't remember what the 3rd team a lot of people think the Clippers, but they're getting James Harden. There's not gonna be a lot of room for, um, a Damian Lillard on that team. Um, I think it's a lot of the East teams that we should be really looking at? No, I was gonna say Rockets, but they just got Fred VanVleet. Oh,
No.
I'm just trying to think.
See, like the Jazz are like they're rebuilding to me, so
Hey,
that's
man,
kind of
they have a
weird.
lot of young talent.
They do.
Trade,
Also,
you could do like a package deal. I believe it's gonna be a three-way deal
yes,
regardless.
it
It's
will
gonna
be.
be it's gonna be Portland, I think Utah, and either Brooklyn or Miami. I think uh Dame's two primary destinations will be Brooklyn or Miami.
I could see Tyler Hero going to Brooklyn in a
I've
three-team
seen
trade.
Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson.
Yeah, because Damian Lillard to Brooklyn. I mean, they still have Mikal Bridges. They brought back Cam Johnson. They still have Nicholas Claxton, so they have a solid team. But I don't know if Damian Lillard really puts them in contention to win a championship or compete for the East. I just think Miami makes a lot of sense. I really want to see him on the Miami Heat. I
Oh,
think him, Jimmy, and Bam would be awesome.
I remember the other team. It was the Knicks. I don't know why the Knicks would be
Oh,
interested in him,
do they have
but
Brunson? Yeah, they do have.
they have Brunson, but you could trade Julius Randle and team Jalen Brunson and Damian Lillard up together. Just saying. I think that would be a really good situation for the Knicks.
I can see it. I'm still holding out hope he goes to the Heat. But you did mention James Harden. That's the other kind of big talking point. It looks like he's going to the Clippers. I mean, how is that even going to look? Are we going to have a team of Westbrook, James Harden,
It's
Paul
not going to be
George,
good.
Kawhi Leonard? Like that's going to be wild to see. Like what would the Clippers even give up in a James Harden trade?
Paul George.
No, you would give up Paul George is better than James Harden, I think.
That's what Philly is going to want.
No
I don't.
way. I
That
don't.
Philly is going to want a star in return for everything they gave up for
Yeah.
James Harden. They're going to want a star in return.
Yeah, if I'm the
And then if
Clippers,
let's say they do trade Paul George, it's just going to help Philly. Is if Philly is going to go through the moon with Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and Joel Embiid. I think that's a championship team.
yeah,
I think
I
it's
think they're
honestly good for Philly that James Harden is leaving.
yeah.
But I mean, James Harden, realistically, he shouldn't. I don't know why he's always wanting to get on the move. He's not going with the new CBA that the NBA is putting out. Super teams aren't going to win championships anymore. It's gonna struggle more, and I don't think players have realized that yet. And I mean, we're gonna see that next season with the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns are not going to be good next year. I can promise you that. They have no bench. They have no one to back them up.
They don't have a point guard. They traded campaign, I think, to the
Exactly. They have
Spurs.
no one, and they're trying to build this super team that they've been trying to build. And Kevin Durant got mad because, whatchamacallit, they didn't win the championship last year. Wonder why when you only got Cameron Payne, who is now no longer a part of that team, backing you up.
Yeah, and I
Bradley
think
Beal and Devin Booker and Kevin Durant is gonna be one of the worst team ups that in NBA history, I think.
they're better off with Chris Paul. Like if I would rather have Chris Paul on that team
Yeah.
than Bradley Beal. It's just
Yeah.
yeah.
It was a terrible trade for the Suns, in my opinion. I think I'm glad for Bradley Beal. I love Bradley Beal. I think it was a bad situation for him to go in to try and win.
Yeah.
I think the Warriors won that trade.
Oh yeah. Having Chris Paul I mean, I wanted Bradley Beal to get traded. I've wanted him to get traded for years. Just not to that situation. Like there's so many other teams I would have loved to see him on.
He
Like
should have went to the Warriors.
yeah, or like the Knicks, the Lakers. Like there's so many situations I think he could have benefited from. And I mean, I think Phoenix is going to be a disaster. If I'm being honest, I don't see them even making a
Phoenix is
conference
gonna be.
finals.
I'm calling it. Phoenix is gonna be a worse situation than Kevin Durant in Brooklyn. Or yeah,
Yeah,
Kevin Durant in Brooklyn. I think that's a worse team right now.
I would agree with that. And yeah, I mean, that's really all that's going on in the NBA. I think we're just kind of waiting on James Harden and Damian Lillard. I mean, other than the Clippers for James Harden, like I don't really know. Like I feel like he's in a pretty good situation. I mean, he's playing with the MVP. He's got Tyrese Maxey. Like he's in a good
He's
situation in Philly.
James Harden is the most selfish player in the NBA. He cares about himself. I mean, he just signed a deal that the 76ers were like, here you go, James. Please stay with us. And he went, nah, send me to the Clippers. No, you're, dude, like James Harden is the most selfish player in NBA history. He only cares about himself. And sometimes being selfish is a good thing. But the way that he's handled it, I mean, he went from Oklahoma to yeah. Shout out Night Watchman, tired of the divas breaking contracts. Like, dude, he is such a freaking if there is a diva in the NBA, it's James Harden. And the fact that he has gone from Oklahoma City to Houston, which was a great move for him, that was probably the best career move he could have made, then going from Houston to Brooklyn to try and figure that situation out. And I mean, he literally got fat so he could leave Houston.
I
How does
don't
it?
yeah, like, I understand leaving Houston. They were kinda on the down,
Yeah, but he
but
could have handled
Brooklyn,
it way better than that.
yeah, he coulda. But, like, Brooklyn, in that sense, like, you have Kevin Durant, you have Kyrie Irving. I don't understand what went wrong there, and now you're in another really good situation, and it's like, what happens when you go to the Clippers and things don't work out? Are you just gonna
I can tell you what
request
went wrong in Brooklyn. They played
Mhm.
6 games total together.
It's just mind blowing. Like, that team, they didn't even get a chance. Like, you're right. Like, I don't understand why he even requested a trade from
He
Brooklyn.
doesn't give the team he was on Philly for a year and a half,
Yeah,
and that's not a chance to let you try and win a championship. How many years did, Mike Malone stay on the Nuggets to finally win the first championship in Nuggets franchise history? How many
I
years
don't know.
was Jokic on that team? How many years was Jamal Murray on that team? It doesn't happen on a flip of a dime. It doesn't just, "Oh, let me leave this team because I think this team will do it." No. The Clippers, I think the Clippers window is closed, honestly. I don't think they're primed to win a championship anytime soon. I think Kawhi and Paul George are probably gonna get traded, and they're gonna start a rebuild pretty soon here.
Yeah. And this conversation reminds me of the one we had on your podcast about baseball and kind of like listening to the fans and changing the game for the better. It's kind of like, I kind of feel a little bit of the same way with the NBA. Like, I think the NBA is in a really good spot. I just think all the player movement and the player empowerment, I think it really hurts the NBA, because I think teams lack identity. When you have these stars getting traded every offseason, all this player movement, the teams lose their identity. Like, you think of the teams in the 90s, like when you think of the Bulls, you think of Jordan. When you think of the Knicks, you think of Patrick Ewing. Like, in the 2000s, you think of the Spurs, you think of Tim Duncan. Like, a lot of these teams, it's these players, these stars are just moving
There's
so
teams that are
frequently.
developed instead of, I mean, the
Yeah.
Warriors are the current
Yeah. And the Nuggets, I think, are
example of
another
that.
example.
Nuggets and Warriors are the best current example of that. I think the Celtics are another great example of teams that develop the right way.
Yeah.
I think you have your freak situations, um, like Miami when they had the Heatles. I think that's a freak situation. I don't think super teams will ever. I think super teams are a tough situation to get yourself into. I think the reason that we're having all this player empowerment, I love LeBron. I love LeBron. It's because of him. It's because of his documentary that he did when he said, "I'm headed to South Beach." The reason that these players are so empowered in this league is because of him. And that's no shot at LeBron James. It's not his fault that everybody wanted to know where he was going. I mean, if everybody was asking if I was leaving for ESPN, I wouldn't want to get covered about it and get paid for it. I think that's a dumb argument that people are making about that, but it's you can't I and that I think that's the day the NBA flipped on its head. They rolled over on their belly and said, "Pet me like a dog." I mean, it sucks. I think that's what makes like, I love basketball. I think that's what's made the NBA kinda suck lately, and I'm glad the Adam Silver has passed the CBA where, uh, teams that develop the right way are gonna get, uh, gifted. I mean, they're gonna get a championship sooner rather than later. I'm not exactly sure. I remember I just watched a video on AM Hoops about it, but it's very interesting to see that the player empowerment era is starting to end.
And I think that's a good thing because, like I said, you like seeing a guy like Jokic get drafted, go through all the struggles that that team went through with Jamal Murray getting injured, and finally seeing them, get over the hump. You like to see that with Giannis in Milwaukee. It's just not the same when two of the top 10 players in the league all decide to go join another star and they win a title. It doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel like there was that struggle, that progression, like that build. You want to see that those teams go through that build of getting to that championship level and finally getting over the hump. And I think the NBA needs to get back to that instead of this super teams, just these players teaming up. Like James Harden is just a prime example of that. You go to one super team, it doesn't work out, so then you just go to another one, and that's just not good for the league. And I think it's hopefully heading in the right direction. But that was a really interesting topic as we have gotten very much off track. But I think it was a very fun and good discussion to have. The only other topic we had, because this is a Pistons podcast,
Yeah, there's not a
about
lot going on in the NBA, so we
yeah,
gotta we
there's
gotta
not.
figure out the topics.
Yeah, it's fun to talk NBA. I like talking about the league. I like keeping up with the league. And those are really the two main storylines right now is with Lillard and Harden. I wouldn't say
Trades
this
and free
off.
agencies are my favorite thing to always talk about in any sports. I used to write for the Cubs and White Sox, and that was like my job. I just covered the trade deadline, so that was fun. I always enjoy talking about roster changes.
Yeah. I wouldn't say this has been a disappointing offseason. Just
No,
not a lot has happened. Like I've
there just
compared to
hasn't been anything going
priors.
on this week.
Yeah. But I don't think that's a bad thing. Like obviously it was crazy those off seasons where LeBron's going to the Lakers, KD's going to the Knicks. But I do think, having these star players staying in one place, I think is a good thing for the league. But if we want to get into our last topic,
Absolutely.
it was trade ideas. So we kind of just went over some trade ideas for other teams, but for the Pistons in particular, there's a couple players I think that can be traded. If I'll be honest, like my prediction is the roster that is in place right now is more than likely going to be the roster on opening night. But that still leaves, the trade deadline and stuff like that. And they still could make a move. Was there any moves, maybe a mock trade or a player, a destination for a player on the Pistons roster that you could think of right now?
I actually do. I'm gonna name one I found actually today, then I'll name the other that I think I told you about not too long ago. Um, but so it's a trade for the Pistons to trade Marvin Bagley III and Killian Hayes to the Raptors for Otto Porter Jr. and then I don't is it Otto Porter Jr.? I can't remember. Hold on. It was
I don't know if I haven't been keeping up with Otto Porter
hold
Jr.
on.
if I'm being honest, but um, yeah, while you're looking that up, like the two
Yeah,
players that
I'll
come to
let you
mind.
go and I'll find it.
But yeah, just like Bojan Bogdanovic, he's going to get traded at the trade deadline. I'd be shocked if he doesn't. And I think us speculating and wasting our breath on that. I think the Pistons, he fits well with this team. He's a good veteran for this team. So I don't think he's going to get traded right now. I mean, if there are some teams at the trade deadline, obviously a lot can change in the NBA. I think the Dallas Mavericks have been rumored. I do like Josh Green. He's a young player on the Mavericks. I don't know if you could necessarily get him for Bojan Bogdanovic. But yeah, I just think a veteran team at the trade deadline is going to be the ideal landing spot for him because he did sign that 2-year extension. So the team that's
Yeah.
trading for him is going to get him for the rest of this season and then the entirety of next season. If we're talking about Killian Hayes, it just doesn't make any sense to trade him right now because I just don't think he has any trade value. I
I think he
understand.
actually boosted his trade value at the end of the season.
I mean, maybe a little bit, but what are you realistically getting for Killian Hayes if you trade him right now?
Second round picks.
Yeah.
Second round picks and maybe a veteran.
I mean, I would rather trade Monty Morris at the trade deadline. Like, I think what's going to happen is obviously K is going to be your starter. Um, and then you're going to have Monty Morris and Killian Hayes fighting for that backup position. And I think it's going to be good. It's going to breed competition. It's going to elevate them to, it's going to elevate Killian And eventually, the hope is Killian can overtake Monty Morris and be the backup point guard. But if he doesn't, then you're going to have to make a decision at the trade deadline. But I think the first half of the season is going to be kind of a trial run for Monty Morris and Killian Hayes to see who is going to get that backup position for the second half of the season. Because I do think at the end of the day, one of those two players are going to be traded by the trade deadline.
I do got the trade up. So it is, oh, crap. Press the file tab. Marvin Bagley III, Killian Hayes to the Toronto Raptors. That's it. Detroit would receive Malachi Flynn, Otto Porter Jr., Thaddeus Young, a 2026 second round pick, and a 2027 second round pick.
I mean, you said
Veteran
Flynn.
experience.
You
I
do
think
get
that's
some veterans, yes. To me, I mean, it's fine. Like to me, Bagley and Killian just don't have any trade value. So I guess the Pistons are getting better because of that. But I just think in terms of Bagley, I think he'll probably be on this team for most of this season. Maybe he gets traded at the deadline, but he has that a team option after this year. So they'll probably just cut bait with him after this year to clear up
hey,
the
why not get
ridiculous.
something for him though? You know,
Yeah, if you can, maybe a second round pick or two. Um, But yeah, I think he's going to be off this team because the ridiculous amount of cap space they have in going into next offseason. I think that's a great topic for another podcast. Is kind of looking at the restricted free agents and the unrestricted free agents of next year's free agency that the Pistons could potentially target. Um, but yeah, I think Marvin Bagley is definitely a trade candidate. To me, my prediction would be either Monte Morris or Killian Hayes is moved at the deadline and then Bojan Bogdanovic and maybe Joe Harris. But I do think it'll be a very active trade deadline for the Pistons, and I think that'll be a good thing because Asar Thompson will have some NBA minutes. Marcus Sasser will have some minutes, so those guys will hopefully be able to take on bigger roles as you're moving out these veterans. For maybe you get a rental player or a young player, or probably just some second round picks. I mean, Bojan will get you a first round pick easily, but I think the rest of those guys, maybe Alec Burks, but even then, I don't think, other than Bojan Bogdanovic, I don't think anyone on this roster, any of the veterans, are going to be able to get the Pistons a first round pick.
yeah. And the other trade I actually saw. Shout out JB. JB showed me this. It's Tim Hardaway Jr. and Boban Marjanovic
No
for
way.
Killian Hayes and Bojan Bogdanovic. I think getting Tim Hardaway is a great idea. I think he would help, honestly. I mean, he wouldn't probably be as influential as maybe what I would want to happen, bring another Michigan guy home in Jordan Poole.
You want Jordan Poole?
Bring Jordan to Detroit.
Oh, man. I don't know about Jordan Poole. I mean, he is an NBA champion.
Bring Kuzma home.
Kuzma, I wouldn't mind Kuzma. But,
Even though they just signed him, but
and I do
I think
think
Kuz
he's
would
going
be
to get
fun.
traded because they traded Porzingis
They just
and
signed him.
the Wizards.
Yeah.
But they traded Porzingis and Beal, so it's like they're not trying to win. So what's the point of even keeping Kuzma on their team?
I don't know.
I
They
think
signed him, so they have an
yeah.
idea, but the Wizards have never really had an idea what they were doing in the first place. So
No. We can that's another topic for another podcast, a poverty franchise that is the Washington Wizards.
Night Watchman said film of Bagley and Cade look good at recent ball in scrimmage. Bagley was active and fit. Cade was crafty and nailing his shots. Yes, we did talk about that right at the beginning of the show. But
I'll be honest, like the only good thing I've ever heard about Bagley was just when he was traded to the Pistons in Cade's rookie year, and people were saying like, "Oh, Cade and Bagley have such good chemistry." It's like, yeah, but James Wiseman is better than Marvin Bagley. Jalen
James
Duren,
Wiseman is Marvin Bagley 3.0. He
exactly.
skips the 2.0.
Jalen Duren is like Marvin Bagley, like 6.0, or maybe
Yeah.
like 4 or 5.0. Like, I understand they have good chemistry, but if you put Cade with an athletic big who can rim run and finish at the basket, he's going to have good chemistry with any big man. Like Marvin Bagley, I'm sorry, he's just not he's not going to fit with this team long term because he's not good enough defensively. He's not athletic enough. He's not a good rebounder. He can't shoot the three. Like, he's just in a very weird position. I'm not saying he doesn't have a spot on an NBA team, but like, if you put him on a championship team, you put him on the Denver Nuggets or the Miami Heat, how many minutes is he realistically getting in the playoffs? Maybe.
Not really any.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't.
And he's entering, he's like 24, 25 years old. Like, I'm not saying he's in the prime of his career, but I think this is as good as it's going to get unless he just starts developing a consistent 3-point shot. Um, I think that's just the unfortunate truth with him.
Yeah. So I actually was thinking about this. So my brain just kind of drifts sometimes. You know how you got the go to work Pistons, you got the bad boys. So I see a little connection between a lot of these players on this team. And it has nothing to do with how they play. They're the Fro Bros, dude. You got Killian Hayes, Cade Cunningham, Marvin Bagley, James Wiseman, all having afros, bro. You had Sadiq Bey, who also had an afro, but he's gone. So you got four
Yeah.
guys on that pretty much starting lineup. Or no, three guys on that starting lineup that all have afros. They're the Fro Bros. It's all.
So in 20 years from now, we're going to have the bad boys. We're going to
Yep.
have the going to work, and we're going to have the Fro Bros.
Yep. That's how it works, man. It just
I don't know, man. If it happens, you heard it here first. I'm
Dude,
not gonna complain about
Pistons
it.
territory named it first. We're gonna get shirts that say Fro Bros.
We're gonna have to. I'm gonna have to think of something.
Um,
Would
Someone
you
in the
have to?
chat said y'all should have drafted Imani Bates. Yes, we know.
Yeah.
I'm still a very firm believer that we should have drafted Imani Bates.
No. So
But
here's my, like you said, Cam Whitmore. Like, all those teams passed on Cam Whitmore. Think about all the teams that passed on Imani Bates multiple times in the draft. So it's crazy. Like, if you would have told me a year or two ago he would have been, I think it was the 48th or 49th pick, I would have told you there's no way. But there's a reason all these teams passed on him.
it's
And
because his arrest. That's really why he fell.
yeah, which to be, he reminds me of Bull in a situation like that. I remember a lot of
Who
people
just
wanted,
got signed to the Suns,
yeah,
by the way.
yeah, and he did show some potential with the Magic. And even a guy like Kevin Porter Jr., I remember the Pistons drafted him with the 30th overall pick, then eventually traded that
Houston.
pick. Yes, that was a little disappointing, but I think that it looks like it's been the right decision so far. I don't even think that was this regime. I think that was the previous regime that did that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens with these young guys. It's obviously very early to tell. But was there anything else? We were supposed to go 20, 30 minutes. We've gone almost an hour.
We went
Just,
double.
yes, we doubled
We
it.
went
But
double 20. But
yeah,
I don't know. I've had fun. I think it was worth staying a little bit longer. I think we had some fun talking about stuff. Shout out to Night Watchman and D Sleazy showing some love in the chat, giving us some topics to talk about.
yeah,
But
and
yeah, I mean, it's always a blast going on this podcast with you and the guys. So yeah,
yeah, and definitely incorporating more NBA stuff. I do have some fun ideas. Maybe we could bring back the trivia. We can we'll think of some fun things to do because the off season. I mean, we got a long off season. If we're being honest, there's not going to be too much to talk about, so we're gonna have to get creative.
we'll make sure RJ's not here for trivia, so he doesn't just slam dunk on me and Mateo.
Yeah, he did do really well in the
Dude,
last one.
that was rough. I was having a tough time. I mean, I was at second place, but it was like a 10-point gap, and I was like, "Come on,
Yeah.
man, that was rough."
Another fun idea we have is there's the Sportical quizzes. We could do like a Sportical
Oh,
Pistons
that would be
quiz.
fun. You could do like the what logo is it type thing.
Yeah, or like there's a lot of fun things we could do. We're gonna have to get creative. But yeah, I think that's all we have for you guys. Thank you for joining me, Parker. Make sure to check out Parker's Beer Back podcast. We'll be live tomorrow at certain what time? Do you have a time in mind?
7:30.
7:30 will be live on Beer Bat YouTube channel, so make sure to go check that out. Also, be sure to be on the lookout for his new podcast, which I'm very intrigued.
I'm gonna
What
give
it
the
will
name
be.
right now.
Okay.
It's one of the stupidest names, but it sums up the name of the show or the concept of the show. It's called Banter Bonter. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, so it's gonna be a comedy variety show with me and one of my friends. But stay tuned. It's gonna be we're hoping this is it's gonna be kind of more a casual
Yeah.
show, talking about things that a lot of people know. Um, Kind of sticking away from the sports. I think this will show a little bit of the nerdy side of me. I'm a big Star Wars and comic or superhero guy. You can see like
Oh,
the Captain America poster behind me. So
I'll
yeah,
talk. Yeah, I'll talk Star Wars with you all day.
dude, I love Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. Love that
um,
stuff. So I'm excited to start talking about some stuff like that and just some general talk. It's me and my best friend that I've been friends with since high school. So yeah, it's gonna be exciting. I'm excited to start this up. It's been a long work in the process.
Yeah, well, that'll be exciting. But yeah, check out all the other Pistons content we have on the channel. Also, make sure to check out all the Detroit Tigers content. We have a lot of a lot of draft content coming. Looks like the Tigers might be pulling out another win here. But yeah, we will be
Tie
sure
the
to get,
series.
yes, we'll be sure to get into Tigers talk on
Oh,
Parker's
we're talking
podcast.
about this tomorrow. The Kansas City Royals cheated.
Well, yeah, you guys will have to stay tuned to find out why or what exactly Parker is talking about. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching and listening. We'll see you guys in the next one.